Thank you very much. Ms. Wilmot has made my task easier. She's been a great advocate of almost all of the Commission proposals, so I'll focus on the last 2 or 3 bits perhaps. But before doing that, I would really like, since we're in London, to pay tribute and give credit to the leadership that the UK at all levels has taken in this regulatory file, from the European Parliament to the Council, where British authorities have taken a very, very positive role, from the industry to the research charities, which have been very active in this. You won't hear this very often from a Eurocrat, but I would like to have more of the UK in the process. It's been extremely heartening and extremely useful for us on this. I would like to focus very briefly in the time I have on a few main features of the proposal. The first one is the streamlining of the authorization procedure. Today, with the directive, we have a dualism in Europe, in every member state. There's a separation between ethics committees and national competent authorities, with largely different attribution of tasks. You have basically 27 countries, 27 different models, which have ethics committees and national authorities, with a different division of labor, which reflect the different traditions, and especially the fact that you cannot draw a line between science and ethics in this. We think that every member state should decide internally how to organize itself. This is why we did not mention national competent authorities and ethics committees in our proposal. We make clear what the requirements are, and the requirements of the people assessing an application are those of the World Medical Association Declaration of Helsinki, independence, absence of undue conflicts of interest, and so on and so forth. What matters to us is what is assessed jointly, in case of multinational trials, by all the member states which are involved, and what are the issues that, regardless of whether they're dealt with by an authority which is called ethics committees, or committee for the protection of individuals, or committee on research involving human subjects, and there are a few of the labels that I used actually around Europe, that everything is covered, that we have legal certainty for sponsors, both in industry sponsor, commercial and non-commercial sponsors. So we have competitive timelines and tacit agreement. Tacit agreement for us, including everything, because in the current directive you have tacit agreement for national competent authorities, but not for ethics committees. And the result is that since the introduction of the directive, timelines for the approval of clinical trials have doubled as an average in Europe. We want to have competitive timelines that let authorities and ethics committees and everyone who's involved in the approval do their job in a 21st century environment, not with piles of paper and faxes and monthly meetings, but with a clear cut-off that gives all sponsors a reasonable legal certainty about the timelines and the process. These provisions for us are the keystone of our proposal. Then we have taken a particular care to cater for the needs of non-commercial research. The current directive, which is killing people, failed to take academics into account. More than 1/3 of the clinical trials applied for every year in Europe are non-commercial. And this is a percentage which is falling actually, because the negative impacts in terms of red tape, of awkwardness, of burden, of the directive are not felt so much by, to use the trite cliche, big pharma, but by the small guy or the non-well-funded sponsor. So we've taken a great care to rectify this. Now it's up to the legislator, and this holds in particular for reporting requirements, which, like the clinical study report, have been designed mostly in the 90s for industry submission to marketing authorization authorities. This holds also very much for the introduction of the low intervention clinical trials category, which are trials, in a nutshell, with authorized medicines used in label or according to standard clinical practice, simplified reporting requirements, the national indemnification scheme. Ms. Wilmot was mentioning this. In our impact assessment report, if you are really insomniac, you can have a look at it. It's a break of a couple of hundred pages probably, with the annexes. We, based on data submitted by the member state, we came to the conclusion that in 2009, I think, about 75 million euros were paid in insurance premium, and less than 200,000 euros were paid out in actual payouts to clinical trial subjects. So as she was saying, one of the main circuits of public research funds is public funds, research institution, insurance company, bank. We want to rectify this. This is not about, we've been told already by some member states that this smacks a little bit of 1960s Swedish social democracy from cradle to grave model with state intervention. We are proposing this because the figures tell us that this will be actually more prudent use of taxpayers' money. We have, besides the rules on minors and incapacitated subjects, which are already in the current directive, and which, given the fact that it took 4 years of debates in the European Parliament last time around to arrive at that conclusion, we didn't touch them. We have introduced rules for clinical trials in emergency situations. This is another area where UK research has a leadership role in Europe. We want to establish a clear framework for the gathering of, or the lack of, or the rules for gathering consent of people who are in a coma, who have multiple trauma, stroke, heart failure, etc., in order to enable progress in medicine in these areas. This does not mean, but this is a public of expert, I should probably, does not mean that you have a stroke and you end up in any A&E department and they sort of Frankenstein or Wild West experiment of you. Here the framework is always a clinical trial that has been applied for, has been carefully assessed, and has been authorized. But it's very important, doctors and researchers told us, there have been even articles by researchers in this area which have been instrumental in reaching great progress, who concluded that any form of consensus gathering is unethical because you lose time and you lose patience. I can't possibly comment on this or subscribe to this, but this is the level of the debate, so we try to cater for this. The scope. We propose a large scope. Every clinical trial is basically falling within the scope of the regulation. We have not, and this is on purpose, and we're going to the Commission, I think, is going to resist any indication to the contrary, made any particular provision for any kind of disease or any particular group except for children and the incapacitated. We've had representation from geriatrics, from rare and ultra-rare diseases, from many branches of medicine, which have difficulties in particular with the current directive, or where there are particular difficulties in recruiting patients, etc., etc. What we've done, in particular for issues like rare and ultra-rare diseases, we've tried to set up a procedure which allows multinational clinical trials and allows for the recruitment of an adequate number of patients, which you cannot find in a single member state.
Stefano, can
I think I'm...
speed you to a conclusion?
Yeah, I mentioned the low intervention clinical trials, yeah, I mentioned the national indemnification scheme and that.
Good, you'll have plenty of time to come back on everything. Over to you, Professor.
Yeah.